From Anderson Silva's insane triangle choke right at the end of the fight against Sonnen, to Jack Congo's outstanding comeback against Pat Barry in one of the craziest fights ever, here are some of the greatest comebacks in UFC history. Let's begin with Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. Rodriguez was one of the hottest prospects in the UFC at the time, but he was just coming off a loss, so he had a point to prove in this fight. And on the other hand, the Korean Zombie, well, he was just the Korean Zombie. He needs no introduction. Both fighters were at their best in this one, but Zombie had an edge over Rodriguez on the scorecards. There was a lot of respect between the two though. On multiple occasions between the fight, Rodriguez would just ask Zombie to stop and give him a high five, and Yair decided to do this again with less than 20 seconds remaining on the clock of the 5th round. After their bromance had finished, Jung just charged forward to finish the fight, something he always does. I mean, there's a reason why fans call him the Zombie, but this time Yair just ducked and Jung missed. The Mexican countered with a perfect reverse elbow and the Korean Zombie fell face down on the canvas. And get this, there was only 1 second left in the fight's final round. Comebacks rarely get better than this one, but the next one is Brock Lesnar versus Carwin tore the house down. At that point in his career, Lesnar was an unstoppable beast. Everyone thought he'd dominate the fight and win. Carwin knew he had to put on a display for his fans, and that's what he did. In the first round, he was so strong, he dominated the first round and went really hard on Brock, but that's where he lost the fight. He used up all his stamina in that first round, and there was nothing left in his tank for the second. That's when Lesnar pounced on him. Lesnar made an opening for himself and held him in a triangle choke, and the fight was over for Carwin. Speaking of unstoppable beast, I've got 2 of them in the next one, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya. It was time for them to settle their rivalry once and for all. They were facing each other for a 3rd time, but this time it was different. This time it was inside the UFC octagon. Their first 2 fights weren't even MMA fights, they were kickboxing fights. Pereira was relatively new to MMA. Adesanya had a lot more experience than him. Looking at the facts, there was only 1 winner in that fight, and it was the last stylebender. And it was clear while watching the fight too. Adesanya manhandled and dominated the Brazilian like no one else. Alex lacked the stamina and the skills to last against someone like Adesanya. Pereira was seriously hurt after the first round. I mean, if there were only a few seconds more, he'd have surely been knocked out. This went on for 4 rounds, and in the 5th, Pereira changed everything. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The Nigerian was trying to wrap Pereira in a clinch yet again, but this time he wasn't successful. Right when he raised his arms to grab Pereira, Poatan found an opening and threw a right hand that shocked Adesanya. The Nigerian was hurt, and he made the mistake of trying to clinch him again. This time, Pereira threw a left hook so murderous that Adesanya was out. It was a sensational TKO win for Pereira out of nowhere. Speaking of knocking their opponents out cold, it doesn't get better than the next one, Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards. This is the fight that needs no introduction at all. This is considered by many as one of the greatest title fights in UFC history, and I agree with all those people. The welterweight division desperately needed a fight of this nature, and it completely changed the appearance of the division. The Englishman actually started the fight nicely. In the first round, he became the first fighter to ever take Usman down in UFC. Now, that's something. But the location of that fight, Salt Lake City, wasn't favoring Edwards at all. Rocky's lungs were quickly finished because of the high altitude, and he had no stamina left in him. That's when the Nigerian Nightmare entered the fray and dominated the fight for the next 20 minutes. It was clear that Usman set to win yet another title defense, but that wasn't the case. Edwards is so smart that he rightly predicted when and where Usman will duck his head, and it happened exactly like Edwards played in his mind. And when Usman ducked, he hit him with the most ruthless head kick I've ever seen. Usman was out cold. he was finished. I don't know where Edwards found the strength to do so, but it was a comeback for the ages. I've talked about so many amazing comebacks, and by now you'd think that things can't possibly get better than this. But I have a surprise for you. They do, because now I'm talking about Czech Congo versus Pat Barry in 2011. Many MMA fans and combat sports fans in general have ranked this fight as the third greatest heavyweight MMA fight of all time. And I don't think they're wrong. Fans don't get to see fights like these every day. Barry was looking to make a name for himself in the UFC, and a win against Congo would have taken him straight up in the ranks. But Czech had something else planned. Barry put on a great display at the start. He knocked Congo down with a ruthless punch. Czech wasn't out, but he was badly hurt. Barry realized it, and he wanted to hurt him even more. He landed some more powerful blows, and Congo was knocked out once more. But this time, everyone thought it was over. But surprisingly, Congo wasn't out. Czech somehow managed to get back on his feet. I mean, he could hardly keep his feet steady on the ground, but he got up and just swung for the fences. His shots landed perfectly on Barry, and Barry was down and out. It was one of the greatest fights of 2011, but this still isn't the greatest UFC comeback of all time. Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen is. This one was talked about for months. Sonnen said only one thing before the fight. He said he was gonna bring the fight to Silva like no one else. People thought he'd lost his mind, but it turns out he didn't. Sonnen knew his strengths. He was confident that he has what it takes to dominate the middleweight champion. That fight was a Chael Sonnen wrestling masterclass. He showed us why he's one of the greatest middleweight grapplers on planet Earth. He knocked Silva to the ground, rocked him on his feet in the first round as well. Silva had nothing in that fight. Sonnen had the upper hand for the entirety of that fight. He was winning that fight convincingly, but that was until the halfway point in the fifth and final round. Cause from that point on, the fight turned on its head. The whole world knows that Sonnen's submission defense is poor, and Silva fans were waiting for him to find an opening to pounce on it. And the champion did exactly what fans were hoping for. Sonnen was so close to that win. He was so close that he could even taste it. But Silva had other plans. Silva found an opening and held him in a triangle choke in the final moments of the fifth round. And Sonnen had to give up. It's crazy how you can be so close to winning and still lose. And that's all from me on UFC fighters who came back from behind to win.